The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sealed with my father's crimson wax crest, the weight of his expectations heavier than the paper itself. I stood in my Seattle apartment, the city's drizzle blurring the world outside, and tore it open, already dreading the words. Elliot, you will marry the Omega I've chosen, or you'll lose everything. It read, each syllable a chain tightening around my future. My name is Elliot Kane, a 26-year-old alpha, heir to a tech empire built on my father's ruthless ambition. I'd spent years carving out a life in Seattle, far from his iron grip in San Francisco, chasing freedom in late-night jazz bars and quiet hikes through Olympic National Park. But freedom, it seemed, was a privilege I could never fully claim. The Omega's name was Theo Harper, a 24-year-old man my father had raised like a ward since he was a boy, plucked from some forgotten corner of Portland's foster system. I'd met him only once, at a sterile gala 5 years ago, his hazel eyes wide with a quiet intensity that unsettled me. He was no stranger to my father's world, molded by its rules, yet something about him felt untamed, like a river refusing to be dammed. I tossed the letter onto my cluttered desk, the words Mary and Omega burning in my mind. My father, Victor Kane, was a traditionalist alpha, obsessed with lineage and control, his biotech empire a monument to his dominance. He'd always seen Omegas as tools, vessels for legacy, not people with dreams. Theo, to him, was a perfectly crafted asset, obedient, refined, and bound by gratitude. The idea of forcing us together, of chaining me to someone raised to serve his vision, made my skin crawl. But defiance wasn't simple. My father held the keys to my trust fund, my shares in Canetech, and the life I'd built. Refuse, and I'd be cut off, left with nothing but my pride and a one-bedroom apartment overlooking a rainy city. I paced, the Seattle skyline a gray smear through my window, and wondered if Theo felt the same weight, or if he, too, was just another pawn in my father's game. I flew to San Francisco the next day, the plane slicing through clouds as heavy as my thoughts. My father's estate loomed in Pacific Heights, a sprawling mansion of glass and steel, cold despite its opulence. Theo was already there, waiting in the garden where roses bloomed with surgical precision. He stood by a fountain, his slim frame draped in a tailored navy suit, his light brown hair catching the late afternoon sun. At 24, he was striking, delicate yet sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. His scent, a faint mix of cedar and rain, hit me before his gaze did, stirring something primal I fought to ignore. "Elliot," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I didn't ask for this." His words caught me off guard. I'd expected compliance, maybe fear, but not this quiet defiance. "Neither did I," I replied, my tone sharper than intended. "But here we are, playing my father's game." Theo's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I've been playing it my whole life." We stood in silence, the fountain's murmur filling the space between us. I studied him, his high cheekbones, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his fingers fidgeted with the cuff of his sleeve. He wasn't the docile Omega my father described. There was a fire in him, banked but burning, and it made me uneasy. I'd come prepared to resent him, to see him as an extension of my father's control. But Theo was human. Too human. Dinner that night was a masterclass in tension. My father sat at the head of a mahogany table, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, his eyes dissecting us like code. "You'll marry in 3 months," he announced, cutting into his steak. "The ceremony will be at the estate." Theo's been prepared for this since he was 16. Prepared. The word landed like a stone. Theo's fork froze mid-air, his knuckles whitening. I wanted to ask what prepared meant, what my father had done to this man who'd grown up under his roof. But the air felt too fragile to break. Instead, I nodded, my jaw tight, and let the conversation die. Later, in the guest wing, I found Theo on a balcony overlooking the bay. The city lights glittered below, a false promise of freedom. "What's he got on you?" I asked, leaning against the railing. Theo didn't look at me. "Everything," he said simply. "He gave me a home, an education, a life. I owe him." "You don't owe him your future," I said, surprised by the heat in my voice. He turned then, his hazel eyes catching mine. "And you don't owe him yours. But we're both here, aren't we?" That night, I lay awake, Theo's words looping in my head. I didn't want this marriage, this life scripted by my father's hand. But Theo's quiet strength, his refusal to break despite the weight of his past, gnawed at me. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom anymore. I was starting to wonder what his cost. The weeks that followed were a blur of wedding plans and corporate posturing. My father paraded us at Tech events, a perfect alpha-omega pair to bolster his image. Theo played his part flawlessly, charming, poised, every inch the ideal omega. But I saw the cracks. The way his smile faltered when my father spoke, the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. One evening, at a rooftop gala in downtown San Francisco, I found him alone by the edge, staring at the city below. The wind carried the scent of his cedar rain pheromones, and I hated how it pulled at me. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said, stepping closer. He laughed, a brittle sound. "I've been pretending my whole life, Elliot. It's all I know." "Then stop," I said, my voice low. "Tell me who you are when he's not watching." Theo's gaze met mine, raw and unguarded. "I'm someone who dreams of running, of painting, of being more than a debt to be paid." His honesty hit me like a wave. I'd spent years running from my father's shadow, but Theo had been raised in it, shaped by it. Yet here he was dreaming of a life beyond it. I wanted to hate him for being part of this trap, but instead, I felt something dangerous stirring, empathy maybe, or something deeper. As the gala's music swelled, I took a step closer, our shoulders brushing. "If we're stuck in this," I said, "let's at least be honest with each other." Theo nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Deal." That moment felt like a pact, fragile but real. I didn't know then how much it would cost us, or how much it would change everything. The weeks bled into one another, each day a step closer to a wedding neither of us wanted. San Francisco's summer fog cloaked the city, mirroring the haze in my mind as I grappled with my father's ultimatum. Theo and I were bound by his will, two strangers forced into a dance we hadn't chosen. Yet something was shifting between us, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. I started seeking Theo out, not out of duty but curiosity. We met in quiet corners of my father's estate, away from his watchful eyes. One afternoon, in the library, Theo showed me a sketchbook he kept hidden, its pages filled with vibrant landscapes. Crashing waves, starlit deserts, places he'd never been but dreamed of. "This is me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not the omega your father made." I traced a finger over a sketch of a forest, its lines bold yet delicate. "You're good," I said, meaning it. "Why hide this?" He shrugged, a shadow crossing his face. "Your father doesn't approve of frivolous things." Frivolous. The word stung, a reminder of how my father stripped away anything that didn't serve his purpose. I wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of Theo's life under his roof, but his guarded expression stopped me. Instead, I said, "You should keep drawing. Don't let him take that, too." Theo's eyes softened, and for a moment, the air between us felt lighter. "Thanks, Elliot," he murmured, and the sound of my name in his voice sent a jolt through me. I pushed it down, blaming the alpha instincts I'd spent years suppressing. My father's control tightened as the wedding loomed. He summoned us to his office one evening, a sterile room of glass and chrome that felt more like a command center than a home. "You'll sign the prenup tomorrow," he said, sliding a thick document across his desk. "It ensures Theo's loyalty and your commitment to Tech." I scanned the pages, my stomach churning. The terms were suffocating. Theo would relinquish any claim to independence, his assets tied to my father's empire. I'd be locked into a leadership role at Tech, my dreams of a life beyond its walls buried. "This isn't a marriage," I said, my voice low. "It's a contract. It's security," my father snapped. "For both of you." Theo sat silent, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I wanted him to speak, to fight, but he only stared at the floor, his jaw tight. Later, in the hallway, I grabbed his arm. "Why didn't you say anything?" He pulled away, his eyes flashing. "Because it doesn't matter, Elliot. He always wins." "No, he doesn't," I said, stepping closer. "We can fight this. Together." Theo's laugh was bitter. "You think you can outrun Victor Kane? I've tried. It's why I'm still here." His words hit like a punch. I wanted to ask what he meant, what battles he'd fought and lost, but he walked away before I could. That night, I lay awake, the prenup's terms burning in my mind. This wasn't just about me anymore. Theo was trapped, too, and I was starting to care too much to let that stand. A week later, we were sent to Napa Valley for a pre-wedding retreat, a thinly veiled publicity stunt for Tech investors. The vineyard was stunning. Rolling hills, golden sunlight, the air thick with the scent of grapes, but it felt like a gilded cage. Theo and I were assigned a private cottage, a gesture meant to force intimacy. Instead, it gave us space to breathe, away from my father's shadow. One night, after a tense dinner with investors, we sat on the cottage's porch, a bottle of wine between us. The stars were sharp above, and Theo's guard was down, his laughter soft as he recounted a childhood memory of sneaking into a Portland art gallery. "I got caught," he said, grinning, "but the owner let me stay, said I had an eye for color." "You do?" I said, nodding at the sketchbook he'd brought. "Show me something new." He hesitated, then flipped to a sketch of the vineyard, its lines capturing the dusk's glow with aching precision. "This is what I see when I'm here," he said. "Not the investors, not the wedding, just this." I leaned closer, our shoulders brushing. "It's beautiful," I said, but I wasn't just talking about the sketch. Theo's eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just us. The warmth of his presence, the cedar rain scent of him, the way his breath hitched. "Elliot," he whispered, "what are we doing?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice rough, "but I don't want to stop." His hand found mine, tentative but firm, and my heart pounded with a truth I wasn't ready to face. This wasn't just rebellion against my father. This was something real, something that scared me as much as it thrilled me. The retreat ended with a public toast, my father raising a glass to the future of Tech. Theo and I stood side by side, playing our parts, but his hand brushed mine under the table, a silent promise. I knew then that we were in this together, not just against my father, but for something neither of us had expected. But promises are fragile, and my father was watching. Always watching. The vineyard retreat had cracked something open between Theo and me, a fragile trust that felt like defiance and hope woven together. Back in San Francisco, the wedding plans accelerated, a countdown to a future neither of us could fully control. But in stolen moments, late-night talks, shared glances, the brush of his hand against mine, I started to see a life beyond my father's script, one where Theo wasn't just a pawn but a partner. My father's estate became our battlefield. He orchestrated every detail of the wedding, from the guest list to the menu, his control suffocating. Theo and I met in secret, plotting ways to carve out our own space. One night, in the attic where Theo kept his art supplies, he showed me a painting. A stormy sea, waves crashing against a lone lighthouse. "That's me," he said, pointing to the lighthouse. "Standing, but barely." "You're stronger than you think," I said, my voice fierce. "You've survived him all these years." Theo's eyes searched mine. "And you? What are you fighting for, Elliot?" I didn't have an answer then, but his question lingered. I'd spent years running from my father, but now I was running toward something, toward Theo, toward the possibility of us. It was reckless, dangerous, but it felt like the first real choice I'd ever made. The prenup signing was a cold affair, held in a Caintech boardroom with lawyers circling like vultures. Theo's signature was steady, but his eyes were distant, as if he'd retreated somewhere I couldn't reach. Afterward, I found him in the estate's garden, sitting on a bench with his sketchbook closed. "I signed away my life today," he said, his voice hollow. "No, you didn't," I said, sitting beside him. "We'll find a way out. Together." He looked at me, his hazel eyes raw with doubt. "You don't know what he's capable of, Elliot. He's not just your father. He's my everything." The word hit me hard. My father had been Theo's world, his savior, his jailer, his God. I wanted to ask what he'd endured, what scars he carried, but the pain in his voice stopped me. Instead, I took his hand, my thumb brushing over his knuckles. "You're not alone anymore," I said. Theo's breath hitched, and he leaned into me, his forehead resting against my shoulder. It was the first time he'd let himself be vulnerable, and it broke something in me. I wanted to protect him, to tear down the walls my father had built around him. But wanting wasn't enough, not when the wedding was 2 weeks away, and my father's grip was tightening. A scandal broke the next day, orchestrated with surgical precision. A tabloid published photos of Theo at a Portland bar years ago, laughing with another man, the headline screaming, "Caintech is Omega caught in scandal." The article painted Theo as disloyal, a liability to the Cain legacy. I knew my father's hand was behind it, a warning to Theo, a leash to pull him back in line. Theo was a ghost when I found him in his room, his eyes red-rimmed. "He did this," he whispered. "He always does this when I step out of line. Then let's fight back," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "We'll expose him. We'll—" "No." Theo cut me off, his voice sharp. "You don't get it, Elliot. He owns me. He always has." His words were a knife, but it was the tears in his eyes that gutted me. Theo, who'd held himself together through years of my father's control, was breaking. I pulled him into my arms, his body trembling against mine. "I won't let him hurt you anymore," I promised, even as I wondered how I'd keep it. We started digging, piecing together my father's tactics. Theo revealed fragments of his past, how my father had taken him in at 12, molding him into the perfect Omega with lessons in etiquette, suppressants to dull his instincts, and punishments for any hint of rebellion. The tabloid was just one of many tools my father used to keep him in check. I contacted a friend, Mara, a journalist in Seattle with a knack for uncovering corporate secrets. She agreed to investigate Caintech, but warned it would take time. "Your father's a fortress," she said over a secure call. "But every fortress has cracks." Theo and I grew closer, our bond a quiet rebellion. We stole moments in the city, coffee shops in the Mission, walks along the Embarcadero, building a world that was ours, not my father's. One night, under the Golden Gate Bridge's shadow, Theo kissed me, his lips soft and urgent. It was a spark in the dark, a promise that we could be more than pawns. But my father was always one step ahead, and the wedding was closing in. The kiss under the Golden Gate Bridge changed everything. Theo and I were no longer just allies. We were something deeper, something my father could never control. But with the wedding a week away, the walls were closing in, and I knew we were running out of time to break free. My father's next move came swiftly. He summoned us to a private dinner, his eyes gleaming with a predator's calm. "I've secured a new deal for Caintech," he said, swirling his wine. "Your marriage will seal it, a merger with a biotech rival. Theo's compliance ensures their trust." Theo's face was a mask, but his hand trembled under the table. I wanted to scream, to upend the table and shatter my father's plans, but I forced myself to stay calm. "And if we refuse?" I asked, my voice steady. My father's smile was cold. "You won't. Theo knows the consequences." Later, Theo told me the truth. My father held evidence, forged or real, of Theo's past, documents that could ruin him, send him back to the foster system's edge. "He's done it before," Theo said, his voice barely audible. "Leaked just enough to scare me." I felt sick, the weight of my father's cruelty sinking in. Theo wasn't just a ward. He was a prisoner, his loyalty bought with fear. I vowed to find a way out, not just for me but for him. Mara's investigation bore fruit 2 days later. She uncovered records of my father's dealings, shady contracts, coerced partnerships, and a pattern of using omegas as leverage in deals. "He's built an empire on control," Mara said over an encrypted call. "But there's enough here to expose him, if you're ready." But Theo hesitated. "If we do this," he said, pacing the attic, "he'll destroy me. You don't know how far he'll go." "Then we'll protect you," I said, grabbing his shoulders. "I'll protect you." His eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I saw trust there, real, unshakable trust. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's do it." We planned in secret, Mara working to verify her findings while Theo and I prepared for the fallout. We knew exposing my father meant risking everything. My inheritance, Theo's safety, our future. But the alternative was a life in his cage, and neither of us could stomach that. The night before the wedding, Theo and I escaped to Muir Woods, the redwoods towering like silent guardians. We sat on a mossy log, the forest's quiet wrapping around us. "If this goes wrong," Theo said, his voice soft, "I want you to know you made me believe I could be free." I took his hand, my heart aching. "We will be. I promise." He leaned into me, his cedar rain scent grounding me. "I love you, Elliot," he said, the words raw and true. "I love you too," I said, and meant it. It wasn't just rebellion anymore. It was us, against the world. But the world wasn't done with us. That night, my father's men found us, their headlights cutting through the forest's dark. "You're making a mistake," one of them said, his voice clipped. "Victor wants you back. Now." Theo's hand tightened in mine, but I stood firm. "We're not going anywhere," I said. They didn't force us, but their presence was a warning. My father knew we were slipping from his grasp, and he wasn't about to let go without a fight. The morning of the wedding dawned gray, San Francisco's fog a shroud over my father's estate. Theo and I had returned under duress, our defiance simmering but caged. Today was the day we'd either break free or lose everything, but I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore. I was fighting for us. The ceremony was a spectacle. The estate's ballroom packed with Caintek elites and media, all oblivious to the storm brewing. Theo stood beside me, resplendent in a tailored suit, his hazel eyes steady despite the chaos. I could feel his pulse racing through our clasped hands, a silent reminder of what was at stake. Mara had sent the evidence to a major outlet, timed to publish during the ceremony. As the officiant droned on, my phone buzzed with a notification. Caintek CEO exposed in coercion scandal. The room didn't know yet, but the truth was out, a crack in my father's fortress. I glanced at Theo, his face pale but resolute. "Now," he whispered, and I nodded. Before the vows, I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "This wedding is a lie," I said, loud enough for the cameras. "Victor Kane has manipulated us, coerced us, and used Theo's life as leverage. We're not his pawns anymore." The room erupted, gasps and whispers drowning out my father's furious shout. He stormed toward us, his face a mask of rage, but Theo stepped forward, his voice steady. "You raised me to be your tool," he said, "but I'm done being afraid." Security moved in, but the media was faster, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. My father's empire was crumbling, live for the world to see. He lunged for Theo, but I stepped between them, my alpha instincts roaring. "Touch him and you're done," I growled. For the first time, I saw fear in my father's eyes. He backed down, the room's chaos swallowing him. We escaped in the aftermath, Mara's car waiting outside. The story broke wide, Caintek's stock plummeting as investigations began. Theo and I fled to Seattle, my apartment a temporary haven. We were free, but the cost was steep. My inheritance gone, Theo's past exposed, our futures uncertain. One night, as rain lashed the windows, Theo broke. He sat on my couch, his face buried in his hands, tears streaming. "I never thought I'd get out," he sobbed. "I thought I'd be his forever." I knelt before him, my heart shattering. "You're not his," I said, cupping his face. "You're mine, and I'm yours." His tears fell harder, but he leaned into me, our foreheads touching. In that moment, I broke, too, not from pain, but from the weight of what we'd built together. Love, real and raw, born from defiance and tempered by truth. Months later, we stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the same one I'd imagined in that first moment of connection. Theo's hand was warm in mine, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, filled with new dreams. My father's empire was in ruins, his influence shattered, but we were whole. "We did it," Theo said, his voice soft but strong. "We did," I replied, pulling him close. The wind carried our laughter, and for the first time we were free, not just from my father, but to be us. Love, I learned, wasn't just a moment. It was a fight, a promise, a life rebuilt from the ashes of control. And with Theo by my side, it was a life worth living.